Chabad emissary that lives there used to be a former DJ.
Really?
So all the teenagers really loved him and heard his experience and how he came to become a religious Jew. And that was a very interesting Shabbat that we had there. And then we went on Sunday that we developed this plan that we were going to go to the snow mountains. And I think about half the kids had never seen snow before, which was quite, for me, growing up here in Albany, was quite interesting. And I was telling them, what clothes to wear, that they shouldn't get too cold and too wet. And they're all looking at me, and I was like, I don't really know that much. I haven't been in snow, but it was a very, and then that came to fruition. We really put that together, and that was an amazing experience, and all the parents really thanked us for that. It was only a week camp, but it took a lot of planning and a lot of working, and I didn't think I could do it at the beginning, but in the end it worked out, and it was a very great success.
So you filled in. So that's it. Just from the parent and teacher's point of view, they are students, they are young, and they're getting an incredible, almost like an orientation into leading a program. So it's really important because, listen, kids grow up, and therefore, these in Lubavitch or anywhere, when you have young students lead the programs like that, eventually they will go into their own communities. And, all right, they're a few years older, now you're the rabbi of the community. They're already experienced in how to build up a program for youth or for adults. And it's incredible experience for them to be able to, start off, and now they have that, like I say, under their belt, they have to build up a camp and a school and a adult education program. So it's good in so many ways. It's good for the kids, but it's good for the teachers also.
Yeah, I think the system in that way that sends out these, if you want to call us an exchange student where we were learning, sends us out to different communities. I was speaking to some other friends, and that went to different communities, and they were saying that really, they took it on, and they've developed relationships with the communities where they went down to, and they've really took the bull by the horns and developed themselves and helped out the community. That automatically happens when you're not focusing on yourself at that point. A lot of times you don't have much time of the day if you're running 3 different programs at the same time. You have all the people that you actually learn with on a weekly or daily basis, in chavrusas or in, partner one-on-one learning. And you don't have much time for yourself, but you look back at the end of like 6 months or 10 months, and you're like, wow, I did that much. I accomplished that much. I've developed that many relationships. And you really look back at the end of now 2 years for myself. And I look back, and it was an amazing learning experience for me. I wasn't actually sure whether I should go back, I wasn't really sure about my second year. And I had many doubts whether I should go back, and it was far away. I didn't come home in the middle. It's a 10-month stint, and I wasn't sure. I came back for 3 months. Wasn't sure if I should go back for another 10-month stint. And I was discussing it with my father, and I was discussing it with my rabbi there in Sydney. And I came to the conclusion that for myself to gain more for this past year, that where I would gain more is if I was focusing on myself or I wasn't focusing on myself. And I came to the realization that I really would gain more if I went back to Sydney to help out the community. And even though maybe I wasn't putting in that many hours to learn on my own and developing my own learning, trying to get my rabbinical ordination, even then I think it would help out my not necessarily was it quantity, it was more quality. And that really helped out. And I definitely will say I do not regret my decision.
All right, so talk about yourself also. What kind of learning, what kind of yeshiva higher learning was going on there? You weren't just working with the youth.
Well, this past year I was at the culmination of about 7 years of learning, of developing my skills in Talmud and in different Jewish texts in the Code of Jewish Law. The last part is you study a specific parts of the Code of Jewish Law, and then you take some very hard tests on this material. So while I was running a lot of programs, which I didn't really lessen the amount of programs that I did, while I was doing all these programs, I needed some intense learning. So you learn one-on-one with a partner, someone my age, and it's really hard, intense. I was speaking to someone from college, and from a regular college, to really just gauge my own how intense I was studying. And we learned for about 4 to 6 hours a day, depending on how much time we put in. And you have a rabbi that's sitting in the room with you, and you go over to him and ask him phrases or questions or concepts. But you're really on your own. I mean, it's in Hebrew and Aramaic, and you've developed all that over the last 6 years. So basically you have the understanding, but you need to then take it a further step and be able to deduce from the text different law. And it makes it a little harder because it's in Hebrew. It's not as easy, it's not my first language. It's my second language. So you have to really stay on your game and keep on plugging away. It's not like you can just show up to class and fall asleep in the middle. It's up to you. If you want to learn. If you don't have to show up. So it's really on you very much, and you have to learn hard. It's quite intense.
Yeah, with a foreign language also. Even these kids have been learning since, 3 years old, the Hebrew language. But still, it is a second language. So, so you learned, and what about community learning? You said with the high school students, but did there any adult learning? Did people came in after work at night?
Well, that's very interesting, because there wasn't much when we got there. There are some things that were developed from years previous and from guys my age that previously ran programs. But there wasn't many in the adult learning. There was many more kids programs developed already. And actually the first project that I took on was to make an adult learning night and to set up my friends and myself with other adults, trying to get them coming in before work in the morning, after work, in middle of work, on the weekends, whenever I could get a chance to get them to, and I would have, they could have their pick of whichever guy they wanted, and really tried to develop that. And it was one of the most difficult tasks I took on. But one of my best friends and people that I'm closest with in Australia was my first chavrusa, my first learning partner, a 29-year-old, who we learned twice a week, or 3 times a week even, for the last 2 years. And maybe we spoke a lot and learned a little less, but that was for 2 years, and that was very intense. And now, I still speak and learn with him once a week about.
Over the phone now?
Over Skype.
All right. Well, Baruch, we're out of time. You have a lot of interesting stories that you're telling in Australia, and just even informing us of what Australia is and the Australia Jewish community. We never got to your visits around to the other communities, so we may have to call you back and talk about that also. So still you have even more stories. But in the meantime, I think it's very informative. Here we're in New York, and I think most people go to New York City, they see the Jewish community, they don't know if there's a Jewish community anywhere else in the United States, let alone the whole entire world. I've never been in Australia, but there's Jewish communities everywhere, and we see it a little bit more difficult, but it's to live out there. And we didn't talk about the visits that they connect, maybe their foreign exchange, they come to New York, so there's still more to talk about. We can touch upon that also. The Jewish experience of being in New York. We're so close to New York City, we don't appreciate, the Jewish communities that we have, and they're there, and can see so much Jewish life in New York City. In any case, it's an interesting look, a peek into the world around us, and I thank Baruch, my son, for first of all your good work 2 years in Sydney, Australia, but of course, glad to have you back, and we have to talk about your future also. So thank you very much, Baruch, and thank you everybody for viewing The Jewish View.